I can still hear them laughing through the wall, the hollow sound of their mockery drifting up the stairs the day before Thanksgiving. When they thought I was out at the store, they didn't know I'd forgotten my grocery list and doubled back. He brought her into my closet, my own son, his voice unfamiliar, cruel like a stranger's. "This is what I was telling you about," he said. 30 years of the same bargain bin catastrophe." She giggled, that high-pitched sound I once thought was charming. "Oh my God, it's worse than you described. It's like a time capsule of everything that shouldn't have survived the 90s. I stood frozen outside my own bedroom door, heart hammering against my ribs as they rifled through the clothes I'd worn to his graduations, his baseball games, his father's funeral. She pulled out my blue dress, the one with tiny flowers that I'd saved for special occasions. "Who even buys this stuff? Does she think this looks good?" More laughter, my son's voice again. "Mom's always been practical, that's what she calls it anyway. Function over fashion. That's her excuse for looking like this." I wanted to push open the door, confront them, defend myself. But shame held me in place. Shame and something deeper. A realization that no mother should ever have to face. My child, the one I raised alone after his father died when he was just 12, was ashamed of me. Subscribe if this story finds you, and tell me where in the world you're watching from. I quietly backed away, went to my car, sat there hands shaking on the steering wheel for nearly an hour until I was certain I could return and pretend I'd heard nothing. I've always been practical, that much was true because someone had to be. His father, Tom, died suddenly, heart attack, at 42, leaving me a 38-year-old widow with a middle schooler and a mountain of medical debt. There was no time for fashion, for indulgence, for anything beyond survival. I took extra shifts at the hospital where I worked as an administrator, sold our second car, downsized our lives in every possible way. I wore the same clothes until they frayed, then mended them and wore them again. I clipped coupons, bought store brands, packed lunches. I wasn't just practical. I was desperate to keep our lives from falling apart, and somehow we made it. Jacob finished high school, went to college on scholarships. I paid what I could, working 60-hour weeks to cover his housing, his books, his spending money. He graduated, got a job in fashion marketing, fell in love with Alyssa, who worked at the same company. She was sleek, polished. Everything. I wasn't. Her outfits always perfectly coordinated. Her makeup flawless. She looked at me sometimes with a particular smile tight at the edges that I now recognized as pity. But I was proud of them both. Proud that my son had built this glamorous life so different from the one I'd been able to give him more. So I thought, until that day before Thanksgiving, standing outside my own bedroom door, learning how they really saw me. That night I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, replaying their words, my mind drifting to the small locked drawer in my desk, where I kept my financial documents, including statements from my investment account, the one Tom and I had started before Jacob was born, the one I never touched, even during the hardest years, treating it like a sacred trust, the one that had grown steadily for 30 years, now worth more than they could imagine. For the first time since Tom died, I felt a kind of anger unfurling inside me, not just at their cruelty, but at my own silence. I'd spent so long being practical, sacrificing everything, never spending a penny on myself, taking pride in my thrift. But where had it gotten me? Mockery in my own home, shame for what I'd given up. What would Tom think of our son now, measuring his mother's worth by the clothes on her back? I made coffee at dawn, sat at the kitchen table watching the sunrise through the window. When Jacob came down looking for breakfast, I smiled, passed him the pancakes I'd made, pretending nothing had changed. But something had. I smiled through Thanksgiving dinner as they exchanged glances while I wore my practical holiday sweater. I smiled as we washed dishes afterward when Alyssa asked if I'd ever considered updating my look, her voice dripping with false concern. I smiled as Jacob nodded, adding, "Mom's never been interested in that kind of thing," like it was a character flaw, a personal failing rather than the cost of raising him alone. "Fashion just isn't a priority for some people," she said. patting my arm, and I smiled, smiled, while something twisted inside me, a plan taking shape. The Monday after Thanksgiving, I made an appointment with my financial advisor, Martin, who'd been helping me manage Tom's life insurance and our investments for decades. He seemed surprised to see me. I rarely made changes to my portfolio. "Everything okay, Rebecca?" he asked, gesturing toward the chair across from his desk. I nodded. "I want to make some changes?" I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "I've been too careful for too long." Martin looked concerned. "You've been smart." Rebecca built quite a nest egg. "Most people would be envious." I leaned forward. "I want to look at some more aggressive investments. Specifically, I'm interested in Luminous Apparel." His eyebrows raised. "The luxury streetwear brand? They've been growing fast, becoming quite the status symbol with the younger crowd." I nodded. "My son and his wife work there in marketing. I've been following their success. They call it the next big thing." What I didn't tell him was how often Jacob and Alyssa bragged about Luminous, how they name-dropped the founder Derek Chen, how they spent far too much on its overpriced hoodies and sleek athletic wear, flaunting the exclusive employee discount they received. What I didn't tell Martin was that I'd overheard them at our Thanksgiving table, whispering about rumors that Luminous was seeking private investors. Before going public, how they wish they had the capital to buy in. "I'd like to invest," I said, "a significant amount." Martin looked skeptical. "It's riskier than your usual choices," he cautioned. "They're privately held. Information is limited." I smiled. That same smile I'd worn through Thanksgiving dinner. "I trust my son's judgment," I said, "and I've been practical long enough." 2 weeks later, I was sitting in the sleek downtown office of Derek Chen, founder and CEO of Luminous Apparel, wearing my bargain bin blue dress and sensible shoes while he reviewed the proposal Martin had helped me prepare. "This is an unusual request," Derek said, looking up from the papers. "Most of our private investors want a more passive role." I met his gaze. "I'm not most investors," I replied. "I've spent 30 years in healthcare administration. I understand operations efficiency management. I can bring value beyond capital." What I didn't say was that I'd researched him thoroughly, discovered we had more in common than he might suspect, both of us raised by single mothers. Both of us familiar with sacrifice. Derek had started Luminous in his garage just 8 years ago now. It was the darling of the fashion world, valued at nearly $200 million. I watched his face as he considered me, likely taking in my outdated hairstyle, my drugstore makeup, my unfashionable clothes, wondering what this plain middle-aged woman could possibly know about his cutting-edge brand. "The investment amount is impressive," he finally said, "but I'm curious why Luminous? What's your interest in fashion? To be frank, you don't seem like our typical." He trailed off diplomatically. I appreciated that he didn't finish the sentence. "Appearances can be deceiving." I said simply, "I've spent my life being practical now. I want something more, and I believe in what you're building here." 3 hours. Later, I walked out with a deal signed and sealed. I would inject $2 million into Luminous Apparel, becoming one of its largest private investors. In exchange, I would receive an 8% ownership stake and a position as Chief Operations Officer, focusing on streamlining their business processes. It was far more than I'd initially planned to invest, but the deeper I dug into their financials, the more potential I saw. They had the brand, the vision, but their operations were chaotic, inefficient, marked by the growing pains of a company expanding too quickly. The exact problems I'd spent decades solving at the hospital. I didn't tell Jacob or Alyssa. I didn't tell anyone. I just gave notice at the hospital after 27 years, watched as they threw me a modest retirement party where people said kind things about my dedication, my practicality, my sensible approach to problems. I packed up my office, tucked away the cards signed by colleagues who respected me for exactly who I was, regardless of what I wore. I started at Luminous the following Monday in a different building from the marketing department where Jacob and Alyssa worked. I asked Derek not to announce my position company-wide, yet citing a desire to observe operations without preconceptions. He agreed, intrigued by my unconventional approach. I spent my first month quietly transforming their supply chain, reorganizing their warehouse systems, implementing the management practices I'd refined over decades. While I worked, I began to educate myself about fashion, about design, about quality. I hired a personal shopper, explained my situation without mentioning names, asked her to help me build a wardrobe that would reflect who I truly was, not just who I'd had to be. She took measurements, studied my coloring, asked about my preferences. Things no one had asked me in 30 years. What do you like, Rebecca? Not what's practical, not what's affordable. What brings you joy? I started small. A well-tailored blazer that actually fit my shoulders. Properly silk blouses in colors that made my eyes look brighter than I remembered. Pants that didn't bag at the knees, all simple but quality pieces that felt like me, not like a costume. 6 weeks into my tenure at Luminous, Derek called me into his office. The company was preparing for its seasonal all-hands meeting where they would showcase the new collection and recognize top performers. Time to introduce you properly. He said, "Your systems have already cut costs by 22% while improving delivery. Times the board is impressed?" I nodded. "There's something you should know first," I said, and told him about Jacob, and Alyssa explained they worked in marketing that they didn't know about my involvement. I didn't share their cruel words, just that. I wanted to surprise them. Derek looked thoughtful. "Family business can be complicated," he said finally. "Are you sure about this?" I wasn't sure of anything except that something had shifted inside me permanently on that day before Thanksgiving. Something that couldn't be shifted back. The all-hands meeting was held in a converted warehouse space, sleek, minimalist. Exactly what you'd expect from a trendy fashion brand. I dressed carefully that morning in a charcoal suit with clean lines subtle, but expensive jewelry, hair freshly cut and styled. I looked like myself, just a version with choices, with options, with worth. I sat in the front row alongside other executives while employees filed in. I spotted Jacob and Alyssa near the middle. Jacob, in a Luminous branded hoodie that cost more than I used to spend on a month of groceries, Alyssa in one of their signature dresses. They were laughing, heads bent together, not noticing me, not seeing me. Just as they never really had. Derek took the stage, welcomed. Everyone praised the team's hard work, launched into company updates, market position, new collection highlights. I watched my son's face as he absorbed it all, the pride, the belonging, the satisfaction of being part of something exclusive and successful. Then, Derek changed topics. As we scale, operations become as important as innovation. He said, "We've been fortunate to bring on someone with extensive experience in systems management, whose improvements have already transformed our bottom line." He gestured toward me. "I'd like to introduce Rebecca Harmon, our new Chief Operations Officer and significant investor." The room applauded politely as I stood, walked to the stage, accepted the microphone from Derek. I thanked everyone, shared briefly my vision for streamlining operations, supporting the creative team through improved processes. I didn't look at Jacob or Alyssa, not yet. Sometimes the most practical people make the best business decisions. I concluded, because we understand, value sustainability, vision beyond the surface. Only then did I let my eyes find my son in the crowd. His face had drained of color, his mouth slightly open. Beside him, Alyssa was perfectly still, her smile frozen, her eyes wide with dawning horror. I smiled, nodded, handed the microphone back to Derek, and returned to my seat as he continued the meeting. I could feel their eyes on me, but I didn't look their way again. Not during the presentation, not during the networking reception afterward, where I moved confidently between conversations with designers, production managers, other executives. I was nearly ready to leave when I felt a hand on my arm turn to find Jacob standing there, Alyssa hovering behind him, both looking shell-shocked. "Mom?" His voice cracked slightly. "What? How?" I smiled the same smile I'd perfected at Thanksgiving. "Shall we talk privately?" I suggested, gesturing toward a quiet corner. They followed. Numbly. Jacob spoke first. "You're working at Luminous? As an executive? How is that possible?" I met his gaze steadily. "I invested in the company," I said simply. "A significant amount. They needed operational expertise. I have 30 years of it." Alyssa found her voice. "But the clothes you wear, the way you always talked about fashion being frivolous." I raised an eyebrow. "Did I ever say that, Alyssa? Or did you assume?" She flushed. I continued. "I never had the luxury of prioritizing fashion. I was too busy making sure we survived after your father died. Jacob too busy putting you through college. Ensuring you had the opportunities I never did." I smoothed the sleeve of my new suit. "But that doesn't mean I don't understand quality, value, or style." Jacob looked stricken. "Mom? I don't understand. Why wouldn't you tell us you were doing this?" "Theeks. Same reason you wouldn't tell me you were going through my closet mocking my clothes the day before Thanksgiving," I replied, my voice quiet but firm. They both froze. Jacob's face drained of color again. "You heard that?" he whispered. I nodded. "Every word, every laugh, every cruel observation about my bargain bin catastrophe, as you called it." Alyssa stepped forward. "Rebecca, we were just joking around. We didn't mean." I held up my hand. 30 years, I said. "That's how long I wore those clothes, mended them, saved on everything, so you could have what you needed, Jacob. So you would never feel the lack of money the way I did growing up. So you could attend the schools that gave you the education that got you this job where you met your wife, where you both now work for me." Silence stretched between us, thick with uncomfortable revelations. Finally, Jacob spoke, his voice small. "What happens now?" I considered. Him. This man I'd raised, this person I'd sacrificed everything for, who had somehow grown to despise the very sacrifices that built his opportunities. "Now," I said, "we see what you're really made of, both of you, because while I may be your mother, I'm also now part of senior leadership at this company. And based on what I've seen of the marketing department's performance, there are some serious questions about efficiency, accountability, and results." Alyssa paled. "What does that mean exactly?" I smiled. "It means everyone's work speaks for itself, regardless of connections, regardless of appearances." 3 months later, I sat across from Derek in the conference room reviewing quarterly results. "Marketing continues to underperform," he noted. Frowning at the spreadsheet, "Despite the additional resources we've allocated," I nodded. "The campaign concepts are derivative, the execution rushed. We need fresh perspectives." Derek looked up. "Your son and his wife." I met his gaze. "Should be evaluated on their merits just like everyone else." He studied me for a moment, then nodded. "I'll arrange performance reviews for the entire department. We can reconstitute the team as needed." I knew what that meant, knew. That Jacob and Alyssa's positions were at risk. They had coasted for too long, trading on relationships rather than results, hiding behind the company's overall success, without contributing meaningfully to it. And now, without special protection, their shortcomings were becoming evident. I didn't protect them, didn't intervene, didn't offer the safety net I'd always provided. That evening, as I walked to my car, I received a text from Jacob. "Can we talk? It's important. Dinner at our place tomorrow?" Agreed, suggesting 7 p.m. I spent the intervening day in budget meetings, evaluating expansion opportunities, considering the company's future direction, all while wearing a deep blue dress that actually fit my shoulders with subtle gold jewelry that caught the light when I moved. The following evening, I drove to their downtown apartment building, took the elevator to the 12th floor, knocked on their door. Jacob answered, looking tired, shadows under his eyes. "Mom," he said, pulling me into an awkward hug. "Thanks for coming." Alyssa emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel, her smile strained. Rebecca, we made pasta, I remembered you saying. You liked it? I nodded. Followed them into their sleek apartment. All clean lines and trendy furnishings. Noticed they weren't wearing luminous apparel tonight. Just simple casual clothes. I accepted the glass of wine Jacob offered, sat on their angular sofa. We made awkward small talk. Weather traffic restaurant openings until finally over pasta that neither of them seemed able to eat. Jacob cleared his throat. So the marketing department is being restructured. I took a sip of wine, nodded. Many departments are being evaluated for efficiency and results. Alyssa set down her fork. They're letting 8 people go, she said, her voice tight, including us. I met her gaze steadily. The decisions were made by the marketing director and HR based on performance. Metrics, project outcomes, customer acquisition costs. Jacob leaned forward. Mom, we know you have influence. You could say something to Derek. I took another bite of pasta, chewed, thoughtfully swallowed. And why would I do that? I asked. Because we're family, he said, as if it were obvious. Because we made a mistake, we said things we shouldn't have. But this is our careers we're talking about. I set down my fork. I heard you both through that door, not just mocking my clothes, but mocking me who I am, what I prioritized, the sacrifices I made. You weren't making a mistake. You were revealing your true thoughts, feelings you'd obviously discussed many times before. I continued. When I invested in Luminous, when I took this position, I did it. For me, because after 30 years of being practical, of putting everyone else first, I decided to choose myself. But I didn't do it to punish you. I did it because I saw an opportunity both financially and professionally. Alyssa wiped at her eyes. So you're just going to let us get fired? I shook my head. I'm going to let you experience the consequences of your own actions, your own work, your own choices, just as I have throughout my life. I took another sip of wine. The marketing team has been coasting on past successes, recycling ideas while billing more hours. The numbers don't lie, neither do the campaign results. Jacob pushed his plate away. So that's it? Revenge? I felt a flare of anger. Is that what you think this is? Revenge? No, Jacob, this is reality. This is what happens when no one is sheltering you from the consequences of mediocre work. This is what it means to be an adult. I set down my glass. I didn't ask Derek to hire me, didn't demand your department be scrutinized, but I won't intervene to protect you from standards I've been held to my entire career. Silence filled the apartment, broken only by the distant sound of traffic below. Finally, Jacob spoke, his voice quiet. I'm sorry, Mom. Not just about the job, about what we said, what we did. I never thought about what those years cost you, what you gave up for me. Alyssa reached across the table, took my hand. We were cruel, thoughtless. I was jealous of your relationship with Jacob, wanted to feel superior. Never stopped to consider your journey. I looked at their faces, saw something new there. Perhaps the beginning of understanding. There's a difference, I said slowly. Between being fired and being redirected. Luminous is expanding, opening a community outreach division focusing on fashion education, sustainability initiatives for underserved youth. They need people who understand the brand, who can translate its appeal into meaningful programs. Jacob frowned. You want us to work in community outreach? I raised an eyebrow. Is helping others beneath you? He flushed. No, of course not. It's just not what we trained for. I didn't train to be a single mother at 38, I replied. But I adapted, learned, grew, even in bargain bin catastrophes. I stood, gathered my purse. The positions pay 15% less than your current roles, but they're secure with clear metrics for success. If you want them, they're yours. If not, Luminous offers a standard severance package. The choice is yours. I walked to the door, paused, looked back at them still seated at the table, looking shell-shocked. Oh, and if you choose the outreach roles, One of your first projects will be organizing clothing drives for women re-entering the workforce after hardship, ensuring they have professional attire for interviews regardless of their circumstances. With that, I left feeling lighter than I had in months. 6 months later, I stood at the podium in Luminous headquarters presenting our quarterly results to the board. Operations efficiency has improved 34% since implementation of new systems, I concluded, leading to increased profit margins despite expanded community initiatives. Derek nodded approval as I returned to my seat beside him, watched as the marketing director presented the new campaign focusing on sustainability, inclusivity, authentic expression. The slides showed diverse models of all ages wearing Luminous designs, including a silver-haired woman in her 60s, looking powerful, confident in a deep blue, structured dress. The image changed to video footage of a community fashion show organized by the Outreach Division, showcasing local talent mentorship opportunities. I spotted Jacob in the background, helping a teenage girl adjust the drape of a jacket. He'd designed himself his first real creative work in years. Beside him, Alyssa directed photographers, ensuring the youth participants received professional portfolio shots. Their faces both focused, engaged, present in ways I'd never seen at their previous roles. When the presentation ended, Derek leaned toward me. "The community division is performing beyond expectations," he said. "Jacob and Alyssa have shown surprising aptitude for the work." I nodded. Sometimes people need to be challenged in new ways to find their true talents. Later that afternoon, I visited the community center where Jacob and Alyssa were wrapping up a workshop on sustainable fashion practices for high school students. I watched from the doorway as Jacob demonstrated how to repurpose old garments, creating something new from something discarded. His hands confident, his voice enthusiastic. The students gathered around him, engaged, attentive. Alyssa photographed their creations, helping them build portfolios. Neither of them noticed me at first, too absorbed in their work. When the students finally filed out carrying their projects, Jacob looked up, saw me standing there. His face broke into a genuine smile. "Mom," he called, "come see what they made." I walked over, examined the transformed garments, nodded appreciatively. "Impressive work," I said, "from the students and from you." Alyssa joined us, her camera hanging around her neck. "We're learning so much about slow fashion sustainability concepts we never considered. In marketing," she admitted. "It's changed how we think about everything." Jacob touched a repurposed jacket gently. "I never understood before the value of making things last, of seeing potential in what others might discard." His eyes met mine, held a new understanding. I never appreciated what that really means. We walked together to the parking lot, the spring air soft around us. "Dinner Sunday?" Jacob asked. "At our place again? We want to show you our new apartment." They had downsized, moved to a smaller place closer to the community center, traded status for purpose, discovered minimalism not as deprivation but as choice. "I'd like that," I said. "Should I bring anything?" Alyssa smiled. "Just yourself, we've got everything else covered." As I drove home, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror, noted the confident set of my shoulders, the absence of that apologetic tilt I'd carried for decades. I was wearing a simple linen dress in a shade of green that brought out my eyes a piece. I'd chosen myself that made me feel both comfortable and seen. My closet at home now held a curated collection, not excessive, not extravagant, but thoughtfully selected pieces that represented who I was. Not just what I could afford. I no longer apologized for taking up space, for having preferences, for being seen. I pulled into my driveway, noticed the roses I'd planted last fall were beginning to bloom, their scent filling the evening air. As I unlocked my front door, I passed the framed photo on the entryway table. Tom and me on our wedding day, young, hopeful, unaware of what lay ahead beside it, a newer photo, the three of us. Jacob, Alyssa, and me at the Luminous Community Fashion Show. All smiling, genuine, connected, present. I set down my keys, ran, my hand along the smooth wood of the console table. This house, these clothes, this life finally truly mine. I'd spent so long being practical, I'd forgotten how to dream. But now I understood the most practical thing of all is authenticity is living. Truthfully is demanding respect, not from expensive labels, not from status symbols, but from being unapologetically who you are, regardless of who's watching or what they think about your closet. I picked up my phone, checked the time, then opened my calendar tomorrow. I had a meeting with Derek to discuss my next investment idea. A sustainable textile startup run by women coming out of difficult circumstances who understood the value of making something beautiful from what others had discarded. Smiled to myself, thinking how perfectly the pieces had fallen into place. Not just in my wardrobe, but in my life subscribe. If this story resonates with you, I'd love to know what you would have done in my place. And tell me where in the world you're watching from. Remember, sometimes the most powerful thing you can wear isn't fashion, it's your truth.